Don't ask me if I'm funny. You judge that. My life is a joke. I don't need to tell you one.
If you actively and consistently pursue whatever you can conceive to be the highest good, then you will find God, because they're the same thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
5,
And that's been my experience.
4, 3, 2. I don't wanna die young. I don't wanna die young. But if I do, I hope I'm true. And if I leave it up to you, I hope you let some people know that I've been worked hard.
Heavenly Father, I invite your presence into this room. Let my words and my story be of service to anyone listening, that I may edify their hearts and tell the truth. Well, we can't find part of the recording that we did when Nemo interviewed me for my testimony. And where we left off was that I was telling a story about chasing a girl into the wrong department at the Veterans Hospital in Westwood, California, where I was volunteering to beef up my resume because I wanted to go into pre-med, and I was applying for schools at that time, and I had been told by one of my biology teachers that there was a work shadow program at the Osborne Head and Neck Institute, and that there's also an ability to volunteer at the Veterans Hospital in Westwood. And I was doing these things to beef up my resume for college. Now, I should preface this by telling you that today I'm currently a long-term substitute teacher at Culver City High School, my alma mater, where I was a whiz kid at. Trying to teach these kids, motivate them to do well in school. Like, hey, if you work really hard and study and get good grades, you might end up right back here. I was telling the kids about how I got into UCLA because some of them in my AP Chem class are getting ready for college applications. They're always concerned about achieving and their resume, and now there's AI that can search out specific keywords before it even looks at your application. And I was telling them that I entered UCLA as a biomedical engineer, and now I'm a substitute teacher. And so they said, how did that happen? And I said, we're going to need at least 2 hours. So it's only apt that I'm now recording this because I wanted to put out the next episode tomorrow. Today's Wednesday, and I wanted to put it out tomorrow. So I needed to record this. I followed a girl, followed many different girls, women, whatever, into different places. I became the president of a club in high school purely because I was interested in a girl there. So I was at the Veterans Hospital, and we were doing our orientation. I went with my friends Henry Best, who lives on my street, grew up on my street, Blanco Way. Shout out to Blanco Way, and Natalie Estrada. And we were deciding which departments we were going to volunteer at. And I see a girl, and I go, she's attractive. And then they said, what department do you guys want to volunteer for? And they start naming off departments. And then they say oncology. Now, let me look up oncology for you. So I have my screen shared right here because, kind of fun this way. My one of my roommates, Matthew, he said you should have something more dynamic. Oncology is the medical specialty that focuses on cancer. Wow, sounds really fun, and it sounds like a great place to flirt with women. So she says, yeah, I want to go into the oncology department. And so they say, anybody else? And I say, me too. That was not the Me Too that you're thinking of. And followed her into the department. And we get to the department, and let's just say about a week into volunteering there, she talks with the person in charge of tasking us with certain things and says, I actually got another opportunity, internship, volunteer, or whatever. So I'm leaving. So now I was there by myself. Now, let me explain to you what my task was 2 to 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. I was tasked with looking through patient files A to Z and finding out if they were still alive. And if they were not, and if they were deceased, I would look up their patient files and then click and type deceased and cause of death. Hilarious. It was around this time that I had begun to start to get into stand-up comedy. I would write poetry in my notebook, and somewhere along the line, I was listening to Pandora. Pandora was an old website, sort of like Spotify, where you could get recommendations on songs based on a band or an album. They had this music genome project. It was really extraordinary. I think Spotify bought the technology, and now you listen to Spotify and nobody uses Pandora, or at least I don't know anybody that uses Pandora. I also have my phone here. I should use this to like show you different things, Pandora, Pandora. Nope. See, it's a jewelry store. Pandora Music. Yeah, Pandora is a subscription based. Yeah, they had this thing called the Music Genome Project. Let's find this. Yeah. Now I can show it up on the screen. Right there, the Music Genome Project, a musical analysis project seeking to capture the essence of music at the most fundamental level, using various attributes to describe songs and mathematics to connect them together into an interactive map. I was listening to Childish Gambino radio. Look at this guy, Donald Glover. He was the first concert I ever paid money to go see, Childish Gambino. And I was on his Pandora Music bio, and I found out that he was a comedian. I didn't know that. And so all of a sudden, I'm watching Donald Glover, weirdo, on YouTube.com. So this is kind of an interactive journey. Jimmy Butler was traded to the Golden State Warriors. This is the most insane. I knew I was going to get distracted by YouTube. Weirdo, stand-up, full special. If you're watching this one day, you aren't, but Donald Glover, this was your special. This really triggered my YouTube rabbit hole obsession. Donald Glover, weirdo. Now, I was watching that. Let me get back to just me. I was watching that, and I loved it. And I was at the Veterans Hospital, and I would be on a computer, and I'd plug my headphones in and listen to stand-up comedy specials. like while going through patient files A to Z. So I'm doing something extremely morbid, finding out if people are dead 4 hours a day, just like systematically going A to Z. There was hundreds of patient files, and just laughing and passing the time, getting obsessed with stand-up. One night I found Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright is a one-liner comedian. I mean, come on, let's watch some of this. This is gold. I really like that I can have this interactive journey with you. So thanks, Matthew, of course.
That interview was brutal.
We're gonna be underwater for weeks.
So a stand-up comedy, journey.
Guy who wrote that song wrote everything. Why is it a penny for your thoughts, but you have to put your 2 cents in?
Just gold. These is a one-liner, all right? PPDK, that is short for para-pros-dokian. That's one-liners changed my life. And, look over here. Para-pros-dokian. This is the... Oh, I didn't even know. Parhip-onoian. But anyways, this is what a one-liner is, and this guy, Stephen Wright, deadpan one-liners, and look, first recommendation, Mitch Hedberg.
They said, how many of you people feel like animals? And the thing is, everyone cheered after the animals part, but I cheered after the human beings part, because I did not know there was a second part to the question.
Look at this. Patrice O'Neill, Dave Chappelle, Nate Bargatze, Louis C.K. Look at all these. I watched everything. Everything. I would record, what would I do? I would record Comedy Central, HBO on my TiVo. I'd watch every single stand-up clip I could get my hands on. My dad started buying albums for me from Goodwill. I would download albums on my iPad, on my iPod Nano. I was walking into school listening to it. I would listen to it and write jokes. And one night, watching Stephen Wright, I wrote a joke in my notebook. I don't remember which joke was first. But it hooked me. I was really skinny at the time. I wrote a joke. It was like, I used to be a plus size model in Africa. Super corny and racist. No, the stereotype was that Africans were malnourished, and so I was skinny. It just had all these different one-liners. I was obsessed with dark jokes. I really liked Anthony Jeselnik. This was back when albums, were really cool. Jeselnik, just super dark jokes. And then I started doing stand-up, and I would go. It's hard to do this without a co-host walking me through this, but it has to be done. Oh, Caligula, a great special by Jeselnik. People found out I was interested in stand-up at my church, and there was a guy by the name of Tyler Green, and he was doing stand-up and going to our church, and he would he offered, after I met with him, he offered to drive me to open mics, and so he was 30 at the time, I believe, and he was doing stand-up all over LA, and this was my senior year of high school, so he'd pick me up coming from Torrance. He'd pick me up in Culver City, and then we'd drive to Hollywood. We'd go to an open mic at 6, and then sign up there. He'd drop me off at another place. We'd sign up there, and then go back to the other place, perform, then go to the second place, perform, and we'd go to another show, The first show he took me to was What's Up Tiger Lily, which was started by Maria Bamford, who I got to open for and meet later on in my life when I had a mental breakdown. Well, actually, when my sister had her mental breakdown, and then I had mine later. And yeah, in 2006, co-founded by Melinda Hill and Maria Bamford, and we went and we saw Nick Thune performing stand-up, and I had his album, and he had this one joke: "Enough is enough. They're the same word." And I bought camel underwear so I could support my troops. Just one-liners. And we went to the Meltdown, which was this show in the back of a comic book store that got turned up into a stand-up show, The Meltdown, with a TV show, The Meltdown, with this is what it looked like. And all these people that I just watched on Comedy Central before. And when we went, Tyler went into the green room and said hi to everybody, and Sarah Silvermoon was in there, and I said, "Can I go?" And he said, "I don't know about that, because I've done the show before." Tyler proposed to his wife at the stand-up show, and they have a kid now, and it's not even on YouTube anymore. And they have a kid now, and he's a youth pastor. he was trying to he got a writing job, and so I just got obsessed with stand-up. What really pushed me to do it was I got into this work shadow program at the Osborne Head and Neck Institute. And at the time, someone had told me that if you have doubts about medicine or pre-med, you should do biomedical engineering so that you can have a fallback. Daniel Pfeiffer on my volleyball team. And I do this work shadow program. And it's a 6-week work shadow program where you get to shadow a different head and neck surgeon at the Osborne Head and Neck Institute. You have to wear a lab coat and everything. And Dr. Osborne, he actually went to Culver City High School, where I now work, and went to school. And he, very stern, shakes my hand. He immediately stand up straight, look me in the eyes, teaching us how to be professionals. Old black guy, very stern, very strong, assertive. I never had to read those books on the charisma myth and how to be charismatic. I saw him. That was charisma. How to command a room, how to make eye contact. These things. I learned them. I studied these people. I wanted to learn how to diffuse a situation. I'd been called awkward so many times. I was the smart kid, but girls would give me attention. I've always had this ability to get along with everyone. And it's a strength, but it was many times an insecurity when I perceived that somebody didn't like me, or when a situation was quote unquote awkward. That word awkward, what it means is uncomfortable. And when it says somebody says that you're awkward, what it means is there's a certain level of discomfort that they have around you. sometimes the discomfort is on them. I learned from doing stand-up that you can manipulate awkwardness. Because if you could let something uncomfortable hang in the air long enough and show that you are not uncomfortable, now the audience is the one that's uncomfortable. And you get to say, why are you acting weird? And that's funny. So, about a few weeks into the program, it's Yom Kippur, and so the two other students in the program are Jewish, and so they had the day off. So they didn't show up. So it's just me and Dr. Oxborn. Let me show you this guy. He still does the program. In fact, someone at the high school saw my picture on the list of alumni and was gonna, reach out to me. But yeah, they have this program. That's Dr. Osborne. I told him later that he pushed me into not pursuing medicine and becoming a stand-up comedian. And he said, but do you love it? I said, yeah. And he said, that's exactly what my program's about. Ear, nose, and throat. He sat me down and he said, why are you here? And I said, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. And he asked me about myself and finds out we both went to Culver. He played basketball there. I was on the basketball team. Cut to a little bit later where I quit the team to be able to do stand-up after school. I was going from practice to these work shadow programs. And he's supposed to give a lecture because that's what you're supposed to do every week, is to learn a new part of ear, nose, and throat surgery. And he says, we don't need to do this. It's just us. This is too formal. And so he just asked me, why are you here? And I tell him that I want to be an orthopedic surgeon and I'm trying to beef up my resume to go to college, and, I'm still applying to schools and stuff. And he quickly tells me that if there's anything I can picture myself doing besides this, to go do that. And immediately stand-up comedy comes to my mind. I have jokes about this in my one-man show. He said, you can want to be anything, a trapeze artist, a circus clown. I said, what about comedian? He said, probably not that. Anything but that. No, that's not what he said. But immediately I thought, I'm obsessed with stand-up comedy right now, and so I had to do it. And that was the beginning of the end of my life. No. I'm imagining myself telling this to the kids tomorrow, because I probably will. My life doesn't make any sense, but it's been deeply meaningful. I feel very privileged to have experienced the depth of pain and joy and love and excitement and adventure of my life. And now I'm back at my old high school, at my parents' house, in my worst case scenario. Single, not married, no family, not enough money, not enough followers, not famous. But I have stories to tell. And I would trade everything to live them again. He started me on this journey that I feel like I have to go back on I'm leaving to New York in April, going to Canada, going to the Philippines in a week. This year is going to be one of the busiest, most exciting years of my life, and I'm deeply afraid that I'm not going to be able to handle it. That I'm not going to make it through. Because last time it nearly killed me. And I lost a lot of people that represented things very dear to me. When I started, Tyler would drive me to these shows. There was very few people that were under the age of 21. It was me. I later met Marsalis, Richie, Jack Knight, Chloe McGovern, Atlas Novak, and Emily Faye. We would all sit in the back of West Side Comedy Theater, waiting to go up. We had to get an X on our hand because we weren't old enough to be there. So they needed to know that we weren't drinking, and there was a green room, and you get 3 minutes. And sometimes people would stay from the show before, Neil Brennan and Friends, which was a great show. So sometimes you would get a packed house and you would get 3 minutes. And Jack started to get on those big shows, got on Meltdown, go to the Comedy Store, the Improv. Him and Garrick and these people, and you'd see how many times they were getting on stage. He died July 14th, 2022. I was in Edinburgh. I was doing my show. And he committed suicide. Langston Kerman, he performed at UCLA. Sam J, I met her at the back of the Comedy Store. There was some celebrity in the crowd, and I did crowd work on. It was the best set I had at the Comedy Store. Quinta Brunson, she used to do the improv space with us, and she blew up on BuzzFeed. I followed this, and I did stand up. My sister did this summer camp called California State Summer School for the Arts, Cal Arts, for visual arts, and so I applied for creative writing, and this was the summer after my senior year of high school. And I submitted all my poetry. I had lots and lots of poetry. And I got in. And for a month we would teach, or we would learn poetry and writing and different things. And you had a class, you had 2 classes a day, and you'd had a concentration. And so I chose from memoir to metaphor. I thought maybe I should do sketch writing or dialogue writing or something related to stand-up, but something told me, maybe it was God, that I needed to see if I should be writing about myself. I'd been writing these absurd one-liners, and I'd started to copy Anthony Jeselnik because I was so nervous that I thought I could fake arrogance so that my nerves were covered and so that I appeared confident. Instead, I came off completely disingenuous, inauthentic, and an asshole because I was telling these absurd one-liners with the persona of a mean person. It just didn't fit. Anthony Jeselnik would tell dark jokes. I had some dark jokes, and I also had some silly jokes, and it just didn't fit. the first joke I ever wrote that felt, I didn't write it, it appeared to me, that felt authentic to me was, lately I've been playing a lot of Marco Polo alone because I'm just trying to find myself. It's silly, it's referential, it's a one-liner, and it's philosophical, introspective, and absurd. And then the tag was, thank you, that joke is called Marco Solo. It's a pun. And it's in my one-man show. And I recapitulate it at the end. I change it up, and I'm going to be taping it this year. My show. So in this camp, I took this class from one memoir to metaphor. You'd write about yourself, and then you would turn that into an internally consistent fictional world that had rules that were endemic to your own personal experience. The same way that Harry Potter is about depression and represents parts of J.K. Rowling's life. And I shared one of my, well, I should say this. There was only 2 men in the class. And one of them had already written 3 novels. And I had been writing stand-up, a lot of poetry. And this girl gave a harrowing recounting of her alcoholic father's abusive role in her life. And it was dark. Of course it was. And my feedback was that maybe there was no resolution, and is there some sort of silver lining in all this? And she said there is none, and she was crying. I'm not there yet. Snapped back a little bit at me that I would assume that she had resolved her issues when they were currently happening. Valid. A lot of the other students in the class had seen me as an inexperienced writer because I had not been writing fiction like that. And yet I would, I guess, make sweeping generalizations some of the time. And so there was a bit of like you're an outsider. I delivered a piece about getting bullied in high school. And it's pretty dark because that sort of set me on a path to try and figure out how to be cool, how to get some cred through the ability to flirt. Because if you could flirt, then it didn't matter if you weren't good at sports. I had started to get hurt and injured, which is what set me on this path to wanting to investigate being an orthopedic surgeon. I'd tell people I was young at 12 because I got hurt playing baseball. I got hurt playing baseball, I got hurt skateboarding, I just all these slew of injuries. And so that set me on the path for that. And I was slipping on the baseball team. I couldn't really catch a break. I was getting so little playing time, they started to call me Stat Man because I would sit on a bucket of baseballs taking stats. Just utterly humiliating. And I tried to write about that experience, sort of a Freaks and Geeks-esque recounting of how I figured out how to be cool. And this is, I was getting invited to parties. One weekend I remember I got invited to like 5 different parties, and I was getting texts like, where are the parties at? I would hang out with kids on my street and we'd smoke weed, and I could sort of get away with being out all night doing drugs, drinking, because they were across the street. So my mom was like, he's right there. And they know all this stuff. Everybody knows this stuff. When you go through a mental breakdown and try to kill yourself, everything's on the table. You can't hide your secrets. People ask or how did you get to be so vulnerable, so naked, so willing to tell everything? Well, it saved my life. I was having a discussion about that with one of the guys from my church. Why do kids hide things from their parents? Because they're afraid of the repercussions of what their parents are going to do. Well, the world is a lot harsher. Tell them so the world doesn't hurt you. Now, there are parents that are abusive. So I write about this experience and I get some feedback, and it's a little bit like, where's your silver lining, buddy? And they're right. I didn't have one. I was bitter and angry. And in fact, I tried to write my personal statement about that experience. It did not come out well. I ended up writing my personal statement about my experience at the Osborne Head and Neck Institute. And that personal statement I worked with my English teacher on, and that got me into UCLA, among other things. And I wish I could find it, but I've adapted it into my show. And I don't share a lot of things with the students, but maybe that's what I should share with them. Is that the tale? Let me read this. Yom Kippur, 9/29/2017. Yesterday, as I'm writing this, marks the 5-year anniversary of the moment I decided to become a stand-up comedian. I didn't realize it until my friend Chris pointed out that today is Yom Kippur, and I remember that day because it's the reason I was the only student sitting alone in Dr. Osborne's office. I had been there because I was part of a 6-week work shadow program where each week students could shadow a different head and neck surgeon at the Osborne Head and Neck Institute. Dr. Osborne was the founder of the practice, an intimidating man who told you to stand up straight and button up your lab coat the second you shook his hand. He was going to lecture us on head and neck cancer treatment, a touchy subject, his expertise. He was, after all, the founder of the practice, a man who built it up from scratch, a man the other surgeons feared, but respected. I was the only student being lectured that day because the other students were Jewish and had the day off for Yom Kippur. Dr. Osborne and I had the whole hour session to ourselves. He started off cordially asking me where I was from. Oh, Culver City? I went to high school there. Kohler High? For real? Yeah, I played basketball there. Wow, that's awesome. He started talking about cancer surgery. Cancer treatment is a lot like Mexican food. So you got a few major ingredients, right? Like beans, rice, salsa, cheese. There are 3 major ways to treat cancer. There's radiation, surgery, chemo. There's more, but those are the 3 major ways. We use those in different amounts to see what works. He paused a second. You know what? We don't have to do the lecture. It's just you and me. Let me ask you, why are you here? I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. I used to get injured a lot, and I got really into looking up what exactly was wrong. And I've always thought it would be cool to get into that. Well, if there's one thing I can tell you, if there's anything you can picture yourself doing besides this, go do that. Anything at all. You can want to be a circus clown, a trapeze artist, go do that. Because this is one of the hardest things to do in the world, and you can't have any doubts. Not an ounce. Immediately the word stand-up came to my mind. I had been writing jokes for 6 months at this point and obsessively watching stand-up. I even looked up on Google once how to be a comedian. This is true. He said, you can't have any doubts when it comes to something like this. You have to love it. See this? This is a surgery I've done 800 times. I've never made a mistake. You know why? Because it's easy for me. Because I love what I do. People come all over the world to have me operate on them. I'm great at what I do. Suddenly, this hour session turned into a motivational speech, one where I listened and he spoke. I've learned so many lessons from that talk, things that have stuck with me and defined who I am to this day. He asked me, there's 2 runners. One gets a time of 10.000001 seconds and the other gets a time of 10.0001 seconds. What's the difference between these two runners? One's faster. No, they're the same person. They got the exact same time. One just wanted it more. 90% of the decisions you make are based on fear. You don't run a red light because you might get caught or hit by another car. You can't decide who you want to be based on fear. It's one decision you can't make out of fear. He told me about his journey to get to where he was. When I was 8, I'd read anatomy textbooks. I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I was the top of my class and I played sports, had the resume. My counselors told me to apply to community college. I applied to Berkeley and got in. I did my residency and went from maybe wanting to be a family doctor to getting interested in surgery. I became a surgeon and I started this practice from scratch. His main emphasis was, I'm good at what I do and I love what I do. You have to love what you do, but you got to be good. Find the things you love and hopefully you'll be good at it too. Most of the time you will be, or it'll just take time. I left the session in a haze. I had built my whole identity around becoming a doctor. I'd tell people from the age of 12 that I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. I'd done well in school, signed up for internships and programs, volunteered so I could beef up my resume to get into a school, good school. I was at that shadow program purely to have something to put on my college application. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do both. I'm going to be a doctor and a stand-up comedian. F it. Ken Jeong did it. Next week I came back and another doctor was our teacher for the day, Dr. Hamilton. This time the other students were there. We were learning about knot tying. To become a surgeon, you had to learn how to tie knots, suturing up wounds, I guess I spelled that wrong, seamlessly, effortlessly. Any mistake could be fatal. We had a knot tying kit in front of us with rubber tubes parallel to each other. Dr. Hamilton told us their importance. See, this is the major part of the interview. I'll ask the person some questions about themselves, get to know them, all while having them tie knots. I did this all through college. I had a study chair. It was covered in knots. Sorry, I just nudged my mouse. The stick shift to my car covered in knots. Some people would sweat. Some people couldn't handle the interview. I'll ask them to tie a knot they can't do and they'll crack. Other people keep the conversation going, and if they don't know how to, they ask me and they'll figure it out. Those are the people we hire. Those are the people I want to have coffee with because I know they did the work to get here. Everyone did the work to get here. They're the same person, but that person was more prepared, more ready to take on challenges. You could say they wanted it more. And most importantly, I want to have coffee with them. They're interesting. He showed us the cover of the box. See this kit? You can get it free online. If you guys are really serious about this thing, you guys will get the kit and start now. I left the session feeling flustered once again. I talked to the other students on the way out. Wasn't that crazy about what he said? Like people would sweat in interviews. One guy said, yeah, I mean, I've always known I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. The other guy was pretty sure. They're both still doing it. One of them ended up going to UCLA with me. I said to him, still doing the pre-med thing? Yeah, man, of course. I ended up ordering that knot tying kit and I got in the mail. I looked at the CD they had come with it, watched some videos, and it wasn't for me. That kit stayed by my bedside for months, and that's when I knew I didn't want to be a surgeon. Well, I guess it was just stand-up. Kind of. I tried stand-up 2 weeks after that fateful meeting with Dr. Osborne. It went bad. Of course it did. I mean, at least I thought it did. I was so nervous beforehand that I wrote material about all the other performers before me and spent my first 3 minutes not even doing my own jokes, despite having 6 months of jokes stockpiled. I watched a clip back a month later. I had one joke that worked. They say if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So I broke all my dog's legs, then got him neutered. That's pretty funny still. I kept going. I met a guy in my church who had been doing it a while, and he would take me to open mics. I remember watching my first live show with him, What's Up Tiger Lily. I saw Nick Thune, one of my favorites at the time. We had 2 mics before and one after. I was like, holy F, this is amazing, which was a show run by Dave Ross. Holy F. He was a regular at the Meltdown, and it took me in. Jesselnick was on stage. Hannibal Buress went up. Look, I transcribed. Do I still have it? I would transcribe jokes. I don't know if I still have it. Oh, different. I mean, this is how obsessed I was. Pigeon joke. Oh, it's not there. I would transcribe Hannibal's jokes and look at the structure. And Kristen Shaw, I saw Rory Scovel do an hour. I remember coming home thinking, well, I don't have to even be a comedian. I get to see stuff like this because I'm in LA. At least a little bit. Not the same anymore with stand-up, but I don't know what's going to happen. I was still going to school for biomedical engineering. I knew I didn't want to do it, but a person had told me that if I was having doubts about becoming a doctor, I should do bioengineering because it gives you the option of not going to medical school. I hated it, though. After a few weeks, I was screaming F every few seconds, and now I'm freaking teaching chemistry. And the kids are going to ask me from the AP, God, you are great. See, stories are just incredible that I get to live and tell. I'd cry in the showers in the Dykstra dorm like Moaning Myrtle and Harry Potter. I told my parents I didn't want to do engineering, even though we had agreed on at least a year of it before I changed. They were understandably not on board. I had no reason to think I could do the comedy thing. I wasn't very good, and I was only doing it twice a week. Winter break of freshman year, when I decided to switch from engineering, I remember I made a goal to do 7 sets a week on average. I reached that goal doing 450 sets that year, surpassing my goal. I switched finally from engineering to English after many tears from my mom. Bless her heart for putting me through college and supporting me even now. Take the bus at 3 p.m. right next to the Chick-fil-A in Westwood. And go up at 6 p.m. Open mic, typically rock, paper, salads. Do some work while I waited to go up. Go up first, take the bus to another open mic, read on the way to there. Do my set, then go to hopefully a third. Sometimes I would get home at midnight only to get to my dorm and converse with all the happy college kids who had just played Ultimate Frisbee or went out to party. How's your night, man? Fun. Some sets. Dude, that's awesome. It's so cool you do comedy. Yeah, it is. Little did they know I'd cried in the bathroom hours earlier because I'd bombed in a bar that I wasn't allowed into with people I didn't know. Then the bus came late, dropped me off half a mile from campus, and I had to skateboard all the way uphill for 25 minutes. It was brutal sometimes, but God knows it was worth it. I had made some good friends from comedy, but for the most part, I was on my own a lot. I had no real connection to college life. I'd go to class, dream, dropping out, look up how to survive on minimum wage, and go alone on a bus to go try out some joke. People would ask, how's college? It's all right. Side note, anytime someone says I'm all right, it means they're not. Towards the end of sophomore year, I'd had it. I was going to drop off. My friend Eagle told me, dude, you got to be sure though, 100%. I had it one day and was like, F it, I'm out. I hadn't had that moment yet. One day I was playing basketball with my dad. I had just come off a 5-month injury. Was starting to feel it on the court. It's always like that. I went up for a jump shot and immediately retwisted the same ankle I had twisted before. That was it. The moment. I'll never play basketball again. I get injured too much. God is taking away every hobby I have to point me to stand up. I keep getting injured and I'll never be good at basketball. I never want to feel mediocre at stand up. I have to do this. I have to drop out. God will take away every single thing you make an idol. And then make you sacrifice whatever it is. And he'll give you something better. He wasn't taking away every hobby I have to point me to stand up. He was showing me that I'm human. It's the same feeling I had when I decided to do English. I was angry and furious while playing basketball, and I realized it wasn't basketball. It was the feeling of being constrained, unable to move forward in life, all because I hadn't made that leap to pursue what I wanted to do. So I told my mom I can't go back. She said, what? You can take a day off, but you have finals this week. I mean, ever. Then we didn't talk about it for months. I went to New York for a few days that summer and been preparing to tell my parents, bring it up again. I bombed in front of them at a show in Harlem. Man, was I sad. I walked all around Harlem Park that night. Wow, they know I suck. I'll never convince them. Car ride the next day, they said I did fine and that everyone else was way worse. That was enough. I got back to LA and had a set at the Comedy Store. I was 20 at the time. I did well, and Adam, the talent coordinator, told me audition. to become a door guy. He wrote my name down. I thought that meant I had the job. I told my parents I'm going to work at the Comedy Store and drop out. I found out later I had to be 21, so I couldn't work there. I still wanted to drop out. I sat my parents down. I had a long conversation with lots and lots of tears. We talked about how I felt like they didn't trust me with my decision, and my mom expressed why she thought college was valuable. She said something that was different than what I had heard from before. All I heard before was, you need a fallback, which to me translated to, you're not going to make it. She said college gave me a work ethic, character. I sold encyclopedias door to door and took every class I could so I could graduate and immediately give back to my family. You can't do college and comedy, and we're paying for it. I thought of all the nights I laid in my bed depressed, feeling helpless about not being able to juggle school and comedy, only to play FIFA later, not finish any homework or do any stand-up. She was right. I could do both. That year, I committed to staying in school. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I'd do 2 to 3 sets some nights, only to come home at 1 a.m. to stay up 4 hours writing an essay, then wake up, go to class, and repeat. Meanwhile, our club blew up. Our first show back was 300 people, and I got to perform 15 minutes. It was the first time I really did well. I got applause breaks. I thought maybe I'm good at this. I've been doing it every night ever since I told my parents I wanted to drop out. I thought if I'm really serious about this, I have to take it seriously. I stayed in school, did 8 to 10 sets a week. I ran our club, booked shows, booked headliners, ran a weekly, ran a monthly, did a podcast. I felt like I was really doing it. For the next 2 years, I went to school and did comedy. But I felt like I was a student first, a comedian second. I wanted to be a comedian. Summer after my junior year of college, I went to New York to intern at Above Average. It was a huge opportunity because I'd always dreamed of moving to New York after college, and so I wanted to experience it before I went. Man, was it depressing. I was lonely, feeling like I sucked at stand-up. I started to get panic attacks. There were times when I called off work because I couldn't sleep till 4 a.m. in the morning. This sounds familiar. I went back to school and it got worse. I was scared that I wasn't ready to graduate and that I hadn't had anything going for me in comedy, and that the time was ticking because college was almost up. I had put so much pressure on myself to feel like I had some professional groundwork in comedy before I graduated because I wanted to be able to call myself a comedian, a student. No more. It was an identity crisis, something that ate into every relationship, even tearing down one, and I had to get help. I started going to therapy, dealing with some family issues, figuring out where this insane pressure had started. I got on antidepressants. They helped enormously. Gave me a clear mind enough to make decisions that helped me plan for the future. School started to get a little more manageable, and I was able to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I was so close yet so far. It's little inches before I finished the race, that 0.000001 seconds that I needed to push myself to finish. Around that time, I'd been traveling a lot more. I had booked a 2-week tour in Portland, Seattle, and the Bay with some friends. I'd been trying to get the footage. Comics saw me at a show in San Francisco. The set I ended up getting footage for, and he asked me to do a show in LA. I did that show. Little did I know there was a manager in the audience. We met and kept in touch and started work together, and I couldn't believe it. All that anxiety of having some sort of professional validation before I graduated started to go away. It was one of those vision board hippie moments because I'd written it on a Google Docs labeled goals. But I wanted to have representation around the time I graduated. Let's find this. Goals, goals, goals. So many goals. Thank God for Google Docs. Been having this for so long. I swear I made a thing that said goals, goals, goals. It's too many stuff. I still had to finish those last few classes though. I walked the stage, graduated, had a party. Technically, I wasn't finished. And my mom had a sentimental moment where I shared a speech similar to this, where I explained how hard it was for me to finish college. It was a nice moment. Went to Europe and finished my last few classes. Got to see some stand-up, got to go to the Edinburgh Festival. To this day, one of the most transformative experiences I've had comedically. I came back and had one more final. It was hard, but I finished. I felt great. I'd finally finished college. I honestly never thought that day would come. I went back to campus lately to do a show, and I couldn't help but realize the only thing keeping me there was comedy. I felt like I was going back to a place I had conquered, and I didn't want to relive some of the bad memories, the crying in my car, the panic attacks, but I had finished. And I'm so glad I did, because if I did that, then the rest will be a piece of cake. Things have started to get busy again, just like school, but now my homework is doing writing packets for TV shows and preparing for auditions and writing jokes and trying to get footage together. It's just as much work, but it's exactly what I would be doing anyways. People would ask me before you do comedy, I would say me trying to. This week, I was driving home and I thought to myself, holy, I'm really a comedian. This past week and a half, I've done almost 20 sets, 9 of them book shows, 2 auditions, worked on 2 writing packets, got a commercial and voiceover agents, and got to see some amazing comics like Baron Vaughn do amazing things on stage. And I still got a full night's sleep, and I haven't had any panic attacks. I do miss those nights playing FIFA, but I'm doing what I love, and I'm damn good at it too. So now I'm going to start being more confident when people ask me that question. You're a comedian? Yes. My name is Nathanael Philip Abad Mosher. I'm a comedian. Don't ask me if I'm funny. You judge that. My life is a joke. I don't need to tell you one. I finished up. I finished up that camp saying I'm never going to write about myself. It hurts too much. But if I don't write about myself, nobody's gonna tell these stories. My life is incredible. It's unbelievable. My friend says, I'm a testimony. How are you? I know I can work hard. I know I can figure it out. I can. I guess the fear is, how am I gonna do this comedy thing in these environments without losing myself? But I know the Lord will protect me. I'm not funny. I'm so serious. I'm not funny at all. I'm just trying to get by. Just trying to make eye contact, shake your hand, stand up straight. Make people laugh because that's what they like me doing. But I cry so much more than anybody I know. I cry nearly every damn day. Am I depressed? No. I'm so not anxious and not depressed that my therapist had to lie to insurance so I can keep seeing him. I'm filled with deep connection and meaning. I'm only funny because I see things before they happen. And I can misdirect you to make you laugh. Comedians are some of the most sensitive people. Some of the most serious people you'll ever meet. My friend asked me, how are you able to make jokes out of such dark things? I said, well, I don't make any jokes. I only tell you the part that's funny. Because I went through all the other stuff for you. And someone comes into your house, shoots your parents, shoots your family, shoots your grandma, gun to your face. You look down, their fly's undone. That's funny. Nothing else is. It's the order in which you tell it. And I can do music now. I can do poetry. I can hold tension in so many different ways. I'm starting to learn to dance. I'm starting to learn to speak into camera. I'm a comedian. But when the Lord is done with me, He'll use me every single which way. And they'll still call me a comedian. So that's why I'm your substitute teacher. It's funnier that way. Good night.
Next week on From Work to Worship, Nathanael recounts his days at UCLA trying to juggle full-time college, full-time stand-up, and the responsibilities of being a son within the chaos of a newly broken family. Find out how we continue to fight and overcome on next week's episode of From Work to Worship. Pick up the call, take up your sword and go on the adventure of a lifetime. This has been a PPDK Productions original. Follow us as we climb the tallest mountains, slay the fiercest dragons, and pursue the highest good while confronting the greatest evil we've ever known. Join us at ppdkproductions.com. Press play on your purpose.
Press play.
On your purpose.